Sometimes I ask myself, how is it possible that I clearly see what most people cannot? I am sure I'll never get an answer to that, even if I have a burning suspicion why is this the case. Lately I tried Indiana Jones and the Great Circle video game, and I even had to force myself to finish it in order to check it out completely and truly. Normally I would just uninstall the title, but I checked how long is the game, and I concurred that I can do it for a few more hours. But these hours seemed endless, as the game itself is a literal opposite of movies. Stay for a while and let me explain. As you can tell by now, it won't be a very positive review, but it really shouldn't be. First things first, and let's start with a story, which surprisingly enough starts with a scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark film. It fits well enough as the game is set right after the end of that movie. So you can say it's a newfound story in Indiana Jones canon. Later on the story continues in typical Indiana Jones fashion, where one mysterious event starts the whole adventure. At that point I was quite intrigued and very hopeful for a time full of fun and awe. The fool I was. Unfortunately, the structure of a whole story, which consists of main missions and side content, and oftentimes makes no sense due to in which order you do them, so the characters are talking nonsense oftentimes. What doing the means saying good luck with your endeavor, while literally a moment ago he helped the other character with that very situation. This was maddening for me and almost made me skip side content, but if you do that, you will miss plenty of cutscenes and important context. Don't if you do, don't if you don't. And by the way, Indy killing member of Ancient Tribe felt wrong, even if it was unintended. I don't know who thought it would be a good idea, but that someone was very wrong, as it was totally out of character. All in all, the story is not that bad, but we've seen it already in Indiana Jones moving pictures, plenty of times done much better. Don't get me wrong, as I am not a hardcore Indiana Jones fan who thinks the movies are flawless. On the contrary, I think it's plenty wrong with them, both old ones and new ones. Nonetheless, I like the fantasy of archaeology combined with adventure, as plenty of people do, considering popularity of both Indiana Jones and Tomb Raider franchises. To conclude, I do not recommend buying the game for the story. You would be better suited watching cutscenes and even some gameplay on YouTube, rather than paying with your time and money for this game. So maybe the gameplay is very good, engaging and fun, since it's made on id engine, which powers Doom and Wolfenstein games. Not a chance, unfortunately, as gameplay is even worse than story. I don't know how this game has such high scores from critics and players. Maybe I downloaded the wrong version, or I don't know, maybe I live in some parallel universe. Starting on a high note, gameplay customization is very well done. It's very nice touch that you can customize the difficulty to a decent degree, because games has divided it into subcategories, so you can, for example, set it that less enemies can fight you at once but they do more damage, or whatever combination you see fit. And I think this is where the positive aspects end. Yes, it is that bad in my opinion. In film series, action was fast and relentless. In this game, however, everything moves at snail's pace. Developers tried to be smart and added additional steps for action like opening doors. Well, it's not smart but annoying and completely unnecessary. Combat is strange as it is melee first-person brawling with fists and breakable objects. Everything seems to be made from the worst possible materials, as your melee weapons break in one or few hits. This has an unintended comedic effect, plus the fists are swinging too fast for a video game presentation, which make it worse than it should be. And what's with not being able to hit dogs? They can bite you to death, and the most you can do is to shake them off. Troll me sideways, some dog lover was programming this crap. You can forget about shooting your way through, because as soon as you fire first shot at enemies, they will do the same and spam you with deadly bullets in no time. Game really wants you to stick to the predetermined tracks. You're gonna get some shooting much later in the game in specific sections. which is not ideal as those are far and few between. Sure, grab one of the most powerful first-person shooter engines in gaming history and discourage shooting, leaving you to play with not-so-good stealth and melee combat. I think designers of this game were on some heavy drugs, as a sober human being could not come up with such a masterful and evil plan to troll players. Jeez Louise, I hoped for some break from stealth gameplay after Metro Last Light, but in Indiana Jones it is the main element it seems. I am tired, boss. The other thing is the amount of pictures that Indy takes, and that would suggest he's rather a photo reporter or an over-enthusiastic tourist, not adventure-seeking archaeologist. He was never doing that shit in movies. Jesus Christ on a motorbike. Look how they massacre my boy. Characters talking during solving puzzles sometimes makes no sense. All the lines that are delivered in wrong time frames. It's all, how do I put this? Messy. Yes, that's the right word. Messy. When it comes to character progression systems, Indy finds book manuals to learn new perks. It's fine, but not very exciting to say the least. Another disappointing thing is the fact that even though they should be good in theory because of the name of the game, I found almost all locations uninteresting, uninspired and bland, except for one, which was one of the best locations I have seen in video games, Siege of Shanghai, and no, not Battlefield 4 version, but the original 1937, attacked by Japanese, baby please. The sad part is that the cutscenes are way more interesting than actual gameplay, which is boring as all hell. It feels like 100 times worse unbaked version of gameplay from new Tomb Raider games, in first-person perspective to make it even more sick and twisted. Overuse of stealth caused me boredom over the threshold of acceptable level. I just wish I could shoot and brawl my way through most of the time. Maybe that's possible on the lowest difficulty level, but then where's the challenge? Again, doomed if you do, doomed if you don't. Doom, yes, I would rather play Doom, and after this I might finally try the new one. But I am a little bit scared as gameplay looks much slower and less interesting than in Eternal. And the whole shield deflect mechanic don't pump me with optimism, but I'll need to try it eventually. Yeah. As I mentioned before, the game runs on id Tech engine, so it looks and runs better than your run-of-the-mill Unreal Engine Sickling, but it's not all rainbows and sunshines. Because game is running on Vulkan API, you can't use FSR4, but 3.1 looks good enough here I suppose. Later on I chose to use native TAA, which is not bad at all for one reason, much less ray tracing noise than in FSR or XeSS options, especially in cutscenes. Needed to bump up sharpness to 100 however, as TAA was a little bit on a softer side, which in turn led me to switching to XeSS 100% resolution, which gave the sharpest presentation of all. But only in some scenes, so later on I turned back to FSR with native resolution. As you can tell by now, none of the anti-aliasing / upscaling methods was clearly the best. It reminded me of Final Fantasy XVI situation, where I tested so many rendering pipelines only to find out none of them were good enough. In other bad news, game frame generation is way worse than Driver level 1. So I used AMD Fluid Frames this time. Game always uses ray tracing, but fear not, as it is so light that it's not problematic, unless you turn on full path tracing, which is non-viable on 9070 XT, since the frame rates hit the ground hard, proving to be too low to play first-person perspective game with any degree of comfort. I'm talking below 30 FPS on maximum settings. HDR is bugged on PC to the degree that it will tank your 1% low frame rates, which looks and feels choppy, so SDR this time it is. Which is not the greatest loss, because they both look very good. Strange thing, but in most scenes 1% low FPS was great, while in some they were dropping to half of the value. I don't know what it was, something similar could be perceived in Hogwarts Legacy to even more drastic extent. Never mind that, turning off Radeon Anti-Lag fixed most of the inconsistencies. In some places there are still some, and reducing VRAM usage didn't improve it further, so there is no total fix, but it ain't so bad, so I let it slide. It is silly how amongst ultra high resolution textures, there are sometimes so low quality ones that you must ask yourself, how is that even possible, who tested this? As many of them are in obvious places that anyone who plays the main story will encounter. Not so long ago, while reviewing Metro Redux games from 2014, I discovered that they look better than almost all games released in last years, let's say from 2020 to 2025. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is one of the best looking games from that period, yet in some aspects I would say it looks worse than before mentioned Metro games. Character models are way more realistic and detailed in Indiana Jones. However, the environments lack distinct characteristics and that wow effect from Metro Redux, and the smoke effects are not even close to its 10 years older counterpart. On the other hand, the cutscenes look truly fantastic as they are stylized in the same way as movies. Great work with these ones. Still, after watching side by side movie and the game, I think we are a million years away from realistic animations in games. And I will admit, jungle rendering is the best I've seen, up there with forests from Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Overall game looks very good, but there is something uncanny in all that strive for photorealism. I cannot put my finger on it, but in Battlefield 1 photogrammetry was fine, because whole game was stylized on top of that, but in Indiana Jones something feels wrong, as visuals look very good on the first glance. I think the daytime lighting was messed up, because dark places with dim lights don't give me that nauseation feeling. Don't get me wrong, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle looks and runs better than most games, but still, I am not fully satisfied. That's what she said. Excuse me, I could not help myself. When it comes to audio side of this title, sounds are very good. I literally can't complain about anything when it comes to that aspect of the game. Music is great, truly in Indiana Jones spirit. I must admit that Troy Baker actually pulled that off and sounded almost identical to Harrison Ford. I think the untrained ear could not differentiate given the small enough samples. To be completely honest, I think the other voice actors done a fantastic job as well, which we can fully appreciate in cutscenes. As for bugs and glitches, there was almost none of that, but there are some oversights nonetheless. Save system is kinda dumb as it saves the game state infinite number of times when you pass a certain predetermined locations. The cutscenes that I liked so much had one fatal flaw. They were flagged as idle activity, which meant my monitor would go turn off to save its old pixels if I had not made an input like moving my mouse in the last several minutes. That's a really dumb mistake to make. It clearly shows that id Tech engine was not used by its creators. Other than that, the game is in much better technical state than most of the games will ever be. It is time to wrap this one up. So let me sum up my final thoughts about Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. It is lost on me how this game is so highly rated. Maybe I lost touch with reality, but I would rather recommend watching all the cutscenes included in this one on YouTube rather than buying and playing it. I find it utterly boring and uninteresting. The story told in here is just a rehashed and modified version of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Puzzles are as shallow as a pond near local bazaar. I don't know what to tell you, but I simply cannot recommend this game to people other than fans of Indiana Jones films and players who want easy, not demanding experience with decent visuals. But then, there's plenty of games that do easy and mediocre way better, so maybe not. It is also beyond me how this game is rated by general public between 8 and 9 out of 10, or 80 to 90 out of 100 if you will. I clearly don't see how this game is any good and I simply regret times I spent with it. Game is slightly over dozens of hours, following main story and doing only the field work for extra cutscenes, without going out of the way to follow extra puzzles and mysteries. I leave this title utterly disappointed, and I wish for better fate when it comes to Indiana Jones franchise, as I enjoyed the movies even if most of them were not very good. I'm still a fan of adventure in this wild, wild world we live in. Peace in the Middle East. Oh, wait, that's too late for that. I guess I will see you in the next Great Late Review.